Ask the Podcast Coach for June 6th, 2020.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Really happy Saturday morning to you. Good to see you. It's always good to be back on Ask the Podcast Coach. I don't know why. I was just super excited about being here this morning. So
I was excited last night. I was like, hey, it's Friday night. Miss tomorrow. And
I rolled over in bed this morning, and you know how you have to kind of have to think for a second, like, okay, where am I and what day is it? And I rolled over and I'm like, oh, that's right, it's Saturday. I was like, yes. Well, it is Saturday, and that means we have the morning coffee pour. So of course, yes, we want to thank Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Dave, tell them what they've won.
Yeah, if you were looking for cover art, I just ordered more from Mark. So he keeps giving us money and I keep giving it right back to him. I've got a new podcast I'm working on, but if you're looking for cover art, logos, you want a really nice looking website, social media, ebooks, lead magnets, you got it. He's an award-winning graphic web designer with over 30 years in the design field, and he's a podcaster, which is even better. He's been podcasting since 2013, and he's branded over 100 podcasts, and he's eager to work with you. His mission is to ensure your podcast looks as professional as possible, offering you the best chance at success. Check him out, podcastbranding.co. And Mark, thanks for sponsoring the morning pour.
Yeah. Did you make the sound? I didn't quite hear it.
I did.
But we can again. What's the? Oh, it's so beautiful. I think I talked over it. I think that's what I did.
That could be.
Yeah.
But and it's actually, I don't know about you. It's officially like springy here. And summer and things like that. The sun is actually out. So.
Yeah, we're in full summer. It went from winter to summer. Like we had kind of had a spring, but man, it's been 90 all week.
Yeah, so, it is. As I look at my watch, it is 75 outside, supposed to be up to 86. And I went out as always to the Facebook groups. If you have a question, by the way, you can jump right on in. It's just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And we're at askthepodcastcoach.com/live every week. But if you want to jump on in, or you can just throw them in the chat room if you want. And I went out to Facebook to kind of find new stuff. And it's a lot of the kind of same old.
Did you find any?
Well, here is like one. Speaking of somebody who's thinking of starting a show, I uploaded my 10th podcast today. So congratulations on that. And I noticed that my podcasts are all different styles. Like one week, I'll interview a wrestler. Another week, I'll be talking about movies. I feel like I should create different podcasts for my different episodes. Has anyone created multiple shows?
Okay, sorry.
No, everybody's just doing one. That's it. You're not allowed to have two. It's against the law these days.
Oh, how do you? I don't know. I would have 4, 5, 6 years ago, maybe even, but I'm not ripping the question. It's just, you got to have your eyes. That's the kind of thing that drives me crazy on social media sometimes. It's like, did you not look around at all? Like, do you not see, anyways, I get it.
They're still asking what's the best media host. I saw that.
Totally. That'll live on forever. I do think that's a huge temptation, right? When you start a podcast, you start experimenting with different formats, right? You're trying things. I did so in our strengths community, in the community that I work full-time for I've been telling them, hey, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, you're having trouble with your microphone, let's just get on the phone and talk. Like doing this on Facebook, it's not helpful. Like you will get about 8,000 different recommendations. Let me talk to you about what you're doing and how you're going to do it. And I gave the typical 10, get 10 episodes that you never release speech to someone, which is like, get some things done, try some things out. Cause they too were like, well, I'm thinking I might do this, but I'm thinking I might do that. I think those launch or those pilot episodes are really important for that kind of get that out. Like, don't make it a podcast until you're confident it's going to have its format. However, if you want to have a variety podcast, just keep doing it that way. Home Gadget Geeks is nothing but a tech variety show. One week we talk about lawns. The next week we talk about, Wi-Fi enabled garage door openers. The next week we're talking about Bitcoin. those are all variety, right? And the audience has grown to like that. That's the feedback that I get, Dave. So, for me, I always say, go with what's most comfortable. You and I both know though, that starting multiple podcasts, and you're the king of this, is a lot of work. Like, you will be consumed pretty fast.
Well, I told him, I said, keep in mind that the one thing that every podcast needs is promotion. Yeah. You can't just put it out there and think it's going to take off. And I said, and there's only 24 hours in a day. And I said, but it might be, instead, I said, you also need to, I would say that, in fact, let me go, where is, I had it, new to podcasting. Okay. There was a link in Facebook, and let me put this in the chat room. And the question was, hey, I'm kind of new to podcasting. Like, what would be your advice for a new podcaster? So let me read you some of the answers to this. Let's see. What are the rookie mistakes I should avoid as a podcaster? So it's kind of a flip on that. I love podcasting, but definitely want to learn how to grow with it. Don't set your gains too hot. That's a good one. If you speak about some evidence or stats, cite your sources. Turn off notifications. I would start with not using the term podcasted. So I guess somewhere he must have had the wrong, because he has since fixed that. I would record your 6th to 10th episode first, then record episode 1 through 5. This way you won't sound like a newbie when you first start off.
That's true.
And this is the one that Jim always says. And I always, like, everybody thinks if I record it, I have to release it. And no, you can actually throw them away. Yeah. And so, I always go back to my music days. We didn't go do gigs until we were in the basement for, a few months. And I remember like my very first band. I remember we were playing Refugee by Tom Petty. And we actually got through the song. Like, we started it, made it through. Nobody forgot the lyrics. Nobody played the wrong part. Bass play, and and we got through it, and we're like, hey, like, we actually got through the song. Like, so we weren't doing that in front of people. Like, right. You kind of practice first. Don't collab with just anyone. Use constant bit rate. Record a bunch of times to really get a handle on your equipment. Boy, that's a big one, I would say. But the thing I thought was interesting is, I thought I misread the question. I thought the question was, what are my tips? And these are, what are the mistakes? Because nobody in here says anything about content. It's all keep your intro music short. Yeah. You should probably spell check. And nobody's talking about trying to be everything to everyone. Yeah. Like, that's a big mistake.
Well, it's hard to go either wide or narrow. I get this feedback. I just got it this morning on Facebook. Hey, does anybody have a quick, like, they're looking for case studies. And every show I do is a case study. Yeah. Right. And they're in depth, and they're, there's a lot of conversation. And then people are like, well, do you have anything faster than that? Like, you have like a 5-minute version? And it's like, yeah, but the 5-minute version, people go, well, do you have more? So you like, what? You can't please everyone all the time. You just can't do it. You got to kind of stay true to my programs are 45 to 50-minute case studies. That's what they are. And to try to shorten them up is not in my wheelhouse. I'm not good at that. If somebody else wants to do that, they're welcome to. So I think, stay true to what you're best at.
Yeah, Kyle says, I have 2 podcasts that have never seen the light of day. I liked the first one, but didn't have the energy to do it, and the second one was too involved. I started another one. I'm playing with a new media host, and what I like about them is you can dynamically insert ads that are your own, and it's free. So it's not going to be around forever. It will eventually go out of business. It's a horrible business model. And but I have, on my weight loss show, somebody bought from a really old episode, there's a thing called Plan to Eat. It's an app where you can basically scan recipes, and then you take the recipes and put them on a calendar, because I'm going to eat, my turkey meatloaf on Wednesday. And then that turns that into your shopping list. It's pretty sweet. And somebody bought one. I think I made $9 on the affiliate deal. And I was like, huh. And then I was playing with this thing, and I'm like, you know what? I've already told myself I need to cook more. So I started a show called New to Cooking, because it turns out I am new to cooking. And so in the middle, there's an ad for this app. And I'm just like, let's see if this does anything. I have no idea. And it is another kind of typical Dave Jackson, not a great podcast. It's just me. Like the last one I talked about how spices are kind of a pain in the butt because you've got all these little jars and you can't see them. And that's how you end up with 3 jars of oregano because you can never tell that you've already got 2 in the kitchen and things like that.
Uh-oh. Dave was saying earlier he was having some trouble with the internet, so we may have lost him temporarily. We'll give it a second to see if he comes back. You're in the chat room. Let me know. Can you guys still hear me? Was it just Dave that locked up? Nothing like a mid-sentence drop. Just let me know you can hear us in the chat room. That'd be awesome. We'll edit this part out. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, Dave was mentioning we'll do okay. Just Dave's blocked up. Okay, cool. Good. I got it. So Dave's talking about, starting new podcasts based on interests, right? Which is, I think, a really good idea when we think about, I'm always thinking, especially for the episodes of my show. So for like Home Gadget Geeks, now maybe it dropped altogether. Let's see if okay, everyone can see and hear you. Okay, so we'll keep going until Dave comes back. So for my episodes of Home Gadget Geeks, right, I try to spend some time finding what's interesting both to me and to my audience. And so far I haven't gotten any negative feedback on that. We did a all feedback show, or we're doing an all feedback show on Home Gadget Geeks June 18th, and I've asked for some feedback from my audience on that for that all feedback show, and the intent was for them to give, well, one, it's a chance for me to hear from the audience of what they're thinking, and then 2, it gives me a chance maybe to get some new material, to get what are they thinking, right? And so lately I've heard comments, and I have gotten comments back from them that are saying things like that they do like the variety. They don't tune in for everything. That because it's a variety show, they don't necessarily tune into every single show or listen to every single show. If it's a topic that they might not be interested in, then they'll probably skip it. Especially now, right? I mean, we've been having a lot of I don't know about you, I can't keep up with my current podcast subscription, the ones I've subscribed to, right? I can't keep up with them. So it's been interesting to start getting that feedback kind of back in, to start hearing from them. And it's been really, really healthy for me to be able to do that. But it's going to start driving some of the content that I do in the future, because they've given me some pretty good ideas. Dave, can we hear you?
We're back.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
It's my modem.
Oh,
it's either whatever I'm using now. It's not Time Warner Cable, it's Spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Either
Spectrum is losing their connection, or my modem is just going to reboot every now and then.
Yeah,
so looked over. I was like, So that could make the show interesting.
Craig had asked me the question. Well, let's finish your story. So you were saying you had started a cooking.
Oh yeah. So I just started it, and it was fun because I went to make meatloaf, and it dawned on me, I think I've used my oven twice in 4 years. And I turned the time, like the heat up to 375, and it turns out you have to hit the on button or start. So this meatloaf is just sitting there, and I'm like 30 minutes later, I come back, I'm like, that's odd, it's cold. And I was like, and that's which then invented my new tagline, which is welcome to New to Cooking, where you'll either get a great meal or a great story. And so it's just been me trying to cook. And then I'm like I bought an Instant Pot, which has Wi-Fi capability. So I can actually see, like, I can set it on my phone.
Right.
And but there are
the new Instant Pots have Wi-Fi? I mean, I have an Instant Pot. Do you think
there's a new one? Yeah, that came out. And in the fact, like my last episode, which will be out in 2 weeks, so I've also got like 3 weeks ahead. It's just explaining that if you're new to cooking, you have to have the mentality that, you know what, it's a very Three Bears scenario. Where the first time I tried to do hard-boiled eggs am I gone? No, am I back?
You jittered though for a second.
It makes us worry. Yeah. But basically the first time I did hard-boiled eggs in an Instant Pot, they were like not hard at all. And the first time I did sweet potatoes, they were crunchy. Like there's going to be a too soft, too hard, burnt. Okay, now that's good. So
yeah,
that'll
kind of figuring it out. I think this is where let me blend this into what I was saying with just before you came back in. So I think that really all, in your cooking, you're trying different things out, and eventually you're going to find what works for you, what you like, and what works for the equipment that you have. And I think that's a lot of the same thing in trying out different content on podcast of what works for you, what's in your sweet spot, what's your, like I've discovered I'm not good as the authority. Like I'm not a good authority person. I don't want to be the one. I definitely don't want to do solo podcasting. Like that's awful for me. Awful.
I was picturing that when I got booted off of Mike, poor Jim. He's like, no,
it's actually okay. Like I can do it in a pinch. I can do it when I need to. Like I can talk. Like don't get me wrong.
Right.
It's just not my favorite thing to do in podcasting. So getting that audience, Dave, I was saying as you were out, I was saying we're doing an all feedback show for Home Gadget Geeks on June 18th. So I invited the listeners, send me any feedback you want, including stories or questions or comments, whatever, and we'll read them on the show. So 100% feedback show. I don't know if it'll work, but we're going to give it a try. Well, in that feedback that I've gotten back, it's been really, really helpful. Some folks say, yes, you're a variety show, but because of that, I don't listen to every single show. Like they make a determination in the beginning. What are we going to talk about? If we're talking about lawn tech and they live in an apartment, well, okay, probably not going to listen. So I think you run some of that risk, but it's good to hear from them. It's good, much like you get a crunchy potato out of an Instapot, you're like, oh, okay, I got to figure out how to do this differently. I think too, there's opportunities to get some feedback through a survey. And I think some podcasters think a survey has to be like 50 questions and it's got to be super in depth. And we at Gallup, and I don't speak on behalf of Gallup during the show, but I'll just say we've learned surveys need to be short. So, our longest survey is like 12 questions. So,
I think my favorite survey is Lee Silverstein from We Have Cancer. What do you like about the show? What do you wish I would do different? And what would you like to hear in the future? Like that's his survey. It's kind of like what's good, what's bad, and what do you want to hear in the future?
Yeah. No, and it's just good to do it on a fairly regular basis. It's hard. It's hard to get that feedback. And sometimes it's hard to get it. Like it's not hard to receive it. It's hard to just get it. Like you got to keep, Brandon in the chat room was like, oh yeah. I forgot. I need to send some of that feedback into you. And I think I've learned too, like I started, and you would know about this too. You used to take a question of the month. Do you still do that?
Still do. Okay. Yeah. The question of the month this month is if you could have any guest on your show, who would it be and why? Schoolofpodcasting.com/question. We'll get you there.
To ask that. You can't ask that this week and get answers Monday. It's going to take a couple times. It's going to take some consistency in it, right? The more consistent you are, the more it's like the power of advertising. Like the coffee pour became a thing because I just started doing it over and over and over and over. Right. And I think in getting feedback, you have to be persistent about it.
Well, the other thing I learned is I used to always announce the question of the month towards the end of the episode. Well, there are some people that don't make it that far. You got to put it at the front. And it's one of those things that I almost need to have a question of the month be, what should I ask for the question of the month? Because that's one of those things where I'm like, and the last one came from a listener. He's like, why don't you ask that? And I'm like, okay, that's because I had one that was just pretty stinky.
You thought about doing that in your Facebook group, like letting them.
I have.
Sometimes you do that and nobody.
It's crickets.
That's kind of when you have a bad idea too. Like when you put something out and it doesn't spark, like everybody's like. You're like, oh, okay, that probably shouldn't be a question.
Well, I had quit it in, I want to say the beginning of 2020. I was kind of like, all right, I'm out of questions. We're good. And then I had like 3 people like, hey, what happened to the question of the month? I kind of like that. And I was like, oh, all right, well, I guess we'll bring it back.
Brandon asked me a question. I think it was Kyle. While you were gone, he'd said, "Hey," because I mentioned the word case study. Some of my Gallup podcasts, the Called to Coach, we call success stories, and they're really just case studies, right? They're just a 45-minute verbal or 50-minute verbal, working through a certain set of questions. And so, Kyle, when I say case study, that's what that is. In other words, we go in, we follow a case study format. So, what was the problem? How did you explore that? What solutions did you come with? How did you implement it? What was the results, right? Typical kind of case study format. That's a summarized version of it. But so that's what we do. I don't feel like it's good for me to get my customer feedback or my customer case studies in any less time than that. It takes time to get some of those things out. So some people just want things consolidated. Like, just tell me in a minute. It's the DIY YouTube problem, which is I need to fix something. Tell me how to do it in 3 minutes.
That's it. So, Craig wants to know if you had the time to launch another podcast, what would you podcast about? Space,
for sure. Yeah, NASA, space, SpaceX, those kinds of things. If I had time and the resources, and that's to me, that's the most interesting thing to me right now.
Yeah, the Carrie says she sent out a survey after every shoot, but when people don't do it, I get nervous and assume that they're probably just busy. The other thing you
got to keep doing it though. It's got to be in everything, because the percentage of getting a response back is so small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know the one for this month is the 26th is when I need your answer in, and I will get a boatload on the 25th, and I will get a ton on the 26th, and I'll probably get one on the 27th that goes, "Hey, I know I missed the deadline, but,"
which means you should move that deadline up a day. So it's coming, right?
Yeah,
like don't like fake them into a deadline, because you just set that deadline. It's arbitrary. Set it a day earlier.
Yeah. We did that in the band. Our last song was never our last song. No. We always had one in the like one more to pull out of our.
Yeah. No. You kind of want to leave human nature, right? I think when we think people are going to do things we say, we are grossly mistaken. Like, they're not. They're going to do exactly the opposite. Sometimes they're going to, sometimes your biggest fans are also your biggest distractors. Sometimes you can't predict any of these things. And so, and you gotta love your fans, even when they give you really hard feedback.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. Like, when you get really tough feedback and you're like, oh, this is awful, but they're right.
Yeah.
We're at Gallup. We're trying to transition all of our content digital. And it's just not, you just can't snap your fingers. It's a complicated problem. And we're in the midst of changing systems, and we're doing all kinds of tech stuff that's just making it technically very, very difficult. Well, customers want it now. Like, why can't it be now? Why can't I have it? Why can't you just make PDFs and make it available and just put them on the internet? Well, because that's not how commerce works. We need a way to be able to sell it to you. And we need to, you've run merch sites plus and what am I thinking of where people have to sign in? What do we call those? Membership sites. There we go. You've run membership sites. You know how hard that is, right? I mean, that's not easy stuff.
No, it's well, the other thing, anytime if one thing I've learned from, and I guess we all kind of do this, doesn't matter what your job is, but for me in teaching, number one, I love the fact that things change all the time, because then you need training on it. But the other thing I know is, man, do people hate change. And we did a survey, because we would spend a fair amount of money on this book that you got to take home. And then we did a survey of our customers that said, have you used the book since you got home? And they all said, no, never touched it, blah, blah, blah. So we switched to, you can now get a PDF of the book and your example files. And people lost their mind. They're like, wait, where's the book? Because all it was a safety blanket that they could, knowing that if I need to, I can go home and look in the book. And it was like, well, it's the same thing. It's just a PDF. And they were just like, people were like, oh, I paid for a book.
No,
it was part of the, and they were like,
you guys are being cheap. How dare you? Like, I paid for this class. And you're not like, and you're like, oh, well, I thought, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Fred is requesting. We're getting audience requests now for coffee pours.
Okay. All right.
This is the mid-show coffee pour.
Thanks again to Mark at podcastbranding.com. Is it 11? It is 11. Well, of course, I missed a big chunk of it because I was
no worries.
Rebooting my
let's get our awesome supporters in there. Let's get that. Let's get that done and out of the way.
I'm trying to find the PowerPoint because
and by the way, you could sponsor this section, this midsection of the show. There's a teacher's pet option. I think that Dave is going to talk to you. You get the very first slide.
The very first slide
every time, very first slide. You could do that. So Dave, tell them how would they, if they were going to be the teacher's pet, how would they do that?
Well, you basically first have to find the slides. I'm like, where is it?
Riveting
audio. Yeah. I feel like the new media show, Todd and Rob talking about. Why is it not letting me?
You keep working on it.
Hold on it. We've got it. This will work, I guess. Right? I'm assuming you see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I can't.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do they get this?
AskThePodcastCoach.com/awesome. We'll get you there. And yeah, there's one person. This is only available to one person. It's the teacher's pet. If you're looking to start a podcast or you need some feedback on one or anything like that, it is greatly discounted one-on-one coaching with me. And then we always think in every episode, we thank our $20 supporters. So we're talking about awesome people like Greg over at debtshepherd.com and Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. I'm very I'm glad we have sunshine here because Glenn's keep putting pictures on his Facebook where he's riding his bike and snorkeling because he's down in Florida. I'm like, yeah. Max is up in the air at Aviation News Talk.
Hold on. Maybe Dave will come back. It's not good. Now I can't control this. So it'll be interesting to see if we can, chat room while we're waiting for Dave to come back. So we'll see how it comes back. Tell me about in the comments, like, what is your biggest technical hurdle? Like, everybody has something that Max is going to get a lot of advertising on this, says Kerry Porter in the chat room. What's your technical hurdle? Like, what's your and maybe that's not the right word, but nemesis is the word I'm looking for. What's your technical nemesis? What is the thing? This morning, Dave, we're having trouble with his modem or whatever it is. What's the one thing that you have problems with? Craig says it's his website. What about you guys? What's the one? Oh, good. I'm full screen now. That's always nice. But at least this is interesting on StreamYard down here. At least the banner still continues to work. What's the one technical kind of thing? And maybe you maybe have more than one. Your technical nemesis. What always kind of gives you problems? Brandon in the chat room says editing and the time it takes. Editing is certainly, Brandon, I am with you. Like that is anything to do with words is my kryptonite. Been watching a lot of Superman lately. Carrie says my Synology NAS backup service to Backblaze. Okay. Well, that's that. Yeah. Carrie, I have a community that helps with things like that. So just saying, although I'm not sure that's pretty specific to Synology, but getting those, a great NAS device to be able to get your files, audio and video files stored. Carrie says the connection always disconnects on that. So you might want to contact their support on that. I think that would be a Backblaze question. Go to them and see if you can figure out what's going on with that. And maybe with your ISP as well. Max, who's in the chat room, says he's the teacher's pet. Sorry, Max, you got a little extra promo today. That's pretty awesome. Carrie's not happy with her NAS device, so that's a little bit of work. Usually Synologies are really good devices for this, so it's a little surprising to me that you're having some problems with it, and maybe it's I don't know, Synologies on the top of the leaderboard in the NAS department, so that surprised me, but not out of the question. If you ever want to chat about it, let me know. John says, I do remote interviews, and the biggest frustration is the sound quality of the guest. John, amen. Yeah. No, I deal with that all the time. I've just been doing customer testimonials. So we've been joining them, I've been getting them on StreamYard and just asking them 10 questions. That's a kind of a way of doing a video survey. And still, you'd think after 3 months of a pandemic where many of us were forced to go home that people would have upgraded their equipment. And one, the equipment's not available. Two, they just haven't done it. and so people still have really, really, really bad sound. Just everybody. It's crazy what how bad sound is for a lot of people. Fred says having to deal with poor customer service from web host providers like HostGator. Yeah, the customer support is a big deal. That's part of my job, and I'm on the other end of it. I'm dealing with customers that are calling in, and it's hard. It's tough, especially when you're like in Dave's case. This is super frustrating for Dave that he keeps getting booted out and has to figure some things out. He's probably rebooting his router right now. He may be smashing his router as we speak on the on the desk. He's already taken a baseball bat to it. So it is it's frustrating sometimes. I mean, customer support. I was doing some things with Zoom yesterday, so I was trying to do a happy hour call with a buddy man on the deck, and so we joined on Teams first, and Teams was struggling yesterday, so that didn't work. So we tried to switch over to Zoom, and I couldn't create the Zoom call on my phone, so I had to come into the office and create the Zoom call, and then I still couldn't get to it on my phone. I just wanted to chuck the freaking phone and Dave, we're talking about customer support problems. Like I asked them the question in the chat room, what's your technical nemesis? Like your modem right now, whatever's causing the problem.
What I've done while I was waiting is I grabbed the box out of the closet.
Yeah.
Because I go through these about every year and a half. I think this is my third one. So that's about, yeah. And I always buy the warranty now. So I'll walk into Best Buy and go, this doesn't work. Give me a new one.
It's dropping the connection. I thought you were going to say you got the box and you were going to threaten the modem verbally. Yeah. I'm taking you back.
Right. I'm taking you back if you don't behave. Yeah. I was like,
I just tell him that you're probably smashing it with a hammer right now. Hey, at least we didn't get through. We ended Max, who's in the chat room. We ended on Max.
Oh,
so Max got a little extra run.
Extra love there. That's cool.
Okay, though. I mean, when you're a $20 subscriber, there's a chance Dave's internet's going to go out and you're going to get some extra promotion.
Shane from Spyberry.
Oh, hold on. Throw up the. I don't see the
thingy-mabob.
Yeah.
Let's do
the screen before we get going.
That. It's really things are being.
Yeah, no worries. It is, we haven't talked about this in a while, but it is the hard part of doing a live show. And you have to roll with the punches. I do everything live. And so, you just have to have some things ready, and you got to kind of bullshit for a while to get people through things. So, all right.
Shane from spyberry.com, Carl White over at lifeinthecarolinaspodcast.com, Kim Craggy at toastmasters101.net, Ed Sullivan at soniccupcake.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, it's super easy. Just go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And one of the reasons why I dug out my box today is at 1:00, the awesome supporters, along with members of the School of Podcasting, will be having a private meetup at 1:00. And I'm like, I got to have this fixed by 1:00. It can't be like rebooting in the middle of my office hours and stuff.
It's going to be tough. We'll have to end right at 11 so you can.
Well, I'm going to say there might not be a post show today. Yeah. Or something. Nah, we'll see. It depends on how frequently this reboots.
Yeah. Well, maybe if it does it one more time by the end of the show, like that would be bad. Like you're going to, it's locking up right now. Yikes.
Is it really?
Hold on.
No, I'm good. I got blue lights.
Okay. So. You were skipping a little bit for me. It's okay.
We'll see.
Kyle, I was asking him what do they struggle with? Like, what's their technical nemesis? And Kyle says his is learning how to use OBS Studio as I experiment with video. Sound syncing is hard. Yeah, OBS is one of those. It's open source. It's free. It's really cool, and it fits under the category of options equal confusion. Like it literally has 8,000 options. And it's funny as I follow the Streamyard Facebook group. Now everybody in that group is trying to get Gage and Dan to add more options. Like they've kept it really, really simple on Streamyard. Like it works. It's simple. And everybody is trying to I can't live without 1080. I can't live without more options from the streaming. I guess the streaming thing down here has a 200 character limit. I need more. I need this. I need that. So OBS is one of those where because they listen to everybody in the community, there's literally 10,000 options.
Well, that's it. And then what's fun is there's OBS, and then there's OBS Studio, and then there's OBS. Like it's people couldn't decide. And so I went with one. They're like, this one doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it's easier. And there was something with like a tip jar, and it ended up like they don't tell you what size graphic to upload. And I upload whatever it was, it got smushed, and it was just everything was just weird. And I just went, yeah, never mind. And that's when StreamYard came along. I was like, well, this does what I want it to do. And oh yeah, it works. You know,
well, and simple almost always works. That's the thing. It's just you're just limited, and it always cracks me up because I've watched this. And by the way, as a podcaster, you can get sucked into this as well. I've watched this because your show can get more and more complicated. Like you can continue to add complicated things, more steps, more tasks, more things. I've watched software do this through several cycles where it starts easy and it works. And you're like, oh, this is great. And then they actually start listening to their customers, and they start adding in all these things. And then all of a sudden you have Microsoft Word, and you go, oh my God, like there are about 8,000 things you can do in Word, you know? And now like in PowerPoint, you can do that. Like in PowerPoint, you can do captions. It's like, I never in a million years would have thought of captions in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So not that it's bad, but it makes it more complicated. And so you come to these things and you're like, oh, geez, how do we do this?
When I used to teach Microsoft Word, it would be like you'd go through, because a lot of it was for people that were writing books, indexes, and table of contents and things like that. And it was cool. But there were many a time I'd be teaching a class and somebody goes, okay, I see what that does, but like, when would I use that? I'm like, if you're writing a book or something, and they're like, oh, or a report, and they're like, oh, yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah,
it was just like a bunch of just extra stuff.
Yeah, well, it's tough for software providers. They create a really cool product, and I applaud Dan and Gage over there at StreamYard for not giving in on some of these things, because you create these things and they get popular, and it really starts pulling in the fringe. And then it's somebody's like, "Hey, can someone make a way for me to podcast without me actually doing anything?" Like that's it. It kind of boils down to that. To that level of service, and you just can't do that, right? It's just not possible.
Well, and it comes back to almost like podcasting. You have to know who your audience is,
right?
But that also means eventually you're going to have somebody who's going to go, yeah, we don't do that. I know you want this and that, but that's not what this is for. You know, it's kind of like the Roadcaster. I think they switched. They started off with the absolute newbie, and they had so many people going, what do you mean you can't, do this and that they're like, okay, we're going to kind of abandon the newbie, and we're going to go with the professional podcaster, because the newbie was going to put out $600 for a device anyway.
Except there's those 5 newbies that do, and then they go on the internet like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what do we do? How do we do this?
I love this. Miss Eileen says, I took one look at OBS and said, nope. And I was like, that's about how I tried it twice. And then I updated my Logitech mic, and there's a software they have called Logi that basically allows you to do a lot of what OBS does without actually the streaming part. I can switch screens and things like that. And I just went, yeah, I don't, because that's what I liked about OBS is I could have these different scenes. And with Logi, they give you
we'll see if Dave comes back from this one. Might not. It kind of depends. Might not.
2 built in, and I was like, well, I'm still here. Am I back? Are you back?
You're back now.
I am back.
You're back. Finish that story.
So I was using the software with the Logitech called Logi, and which is short for Logitech. And it has scenes. It has 2. One, like you can have it set up to just be the camera. It could be you, like it could be your screen with you in the bottom right-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner. Super simple. And I've been using that to create tutorials for the School of Podcasting. It's just a matter of it's like doing it live. I have to, click all the right buttons and things like that. Because with Camtasia, I love that software, but we're like, and render the video and I'll be back in a week. It just takes forever.
Yeah.
So
It's refreshing to hear somebody say, I think Carrie said, sorry, I missed, what's OBS? So
yeah,
apparently it's not, I mean, it is popular, right? I mean, it's screencast software.
Yeah, it's kind of Streamyard, but you load it on your
we'll see
computer. And my whole thing.
You're skipping a little bit, Dave. Hold on. You have a lot of
he's back.
You're gonna have a lot of editing to do on this one.
We're just gonna use the audio from YouTube. So, but yeah, it's this. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay. It's yeah, I am gonna have a lot of editing.
It's gonna be like OBS, a 17-minute show.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I was trying to connect to YouTube because they took away whatever we were using before, the Google Hangouts, right?
Hangouts on air. Yep.
Hangouts on air.
Yeah.
And so I looked at OBS, and then somebody said Streamyard, and I was like, oh wait, this does everything I need and more.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and more is the question on that one. OBS was developed in the days of vMix. And there's another one. There's one other one.
TriCaster?
No, there was another
hardware.
vMix. Yeah. vMix. And anyways, doesn't really matter. And OBS, open source. Those two were proprietary. OBS is open source. And there's a bunch of other ones that do it as well. But there was probably three main ones. And so it kind of comes out of the era of software, right? You install software, you make sure you're controlling it all locally. Where since then, and we think about Google Hangouts kind of starting this, but now with StreamYard, Blab was this way as well, where you're using a browser, you're using the browser to really kind of be your control for this. HTML5 is kind of allowed for that. And so it kind of comes from a different era, so to speak. It's old stuff, but because it's old, it's got just a boatload of options. It is complicated, and it's really made for the expert. I think this is not I'm a newbie, I'm going to dive into OBS and figure this thing out. If you're a newbie, just go to StreamYard. It's just a lot easier.
Yeah.
Just a lot easier.
Here's a phrase I've heard, and I wanted to get your take on it, is if you're doing a podcast and it's just audio, if you decide to now do it live, like we're doing now, is that in essence taking it, in everybody's favorite phrase, to the next level? Like is like, hey, I'm doing a podcast, but now I'm going to do it live on Facebook or StreamYard. I'm like, I want to take it to the next level. And I'm like, I'm not sure live is the next level. It's an additional level. I don't know. What do you think?
I guess it depends on how you're defining levels. So like if levels of complexity, then yes, right? If that's how if you're defining it that way. Levels of success, well, how are you defining your success? If it's advertisers or money or listeners, it may allow you going live on LinkedIn or going live on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. Twitch may get you more listeners. And so if your next level is more listeners, yeah, it could. It exposes you to some new audiences.
Yeah, Dan says, I would say live is not the next level for every show.
Yeah.
Not all shows work. Not all shows work well live. Yeah.
No, for sure. Live is, I think it's a preference thing. You gotta want to do it. You gotta kind of be good at it. Apparently from you and me, you don't have to be good looking.
Nope, not at all. Some podcasters suffer when they switch live. Yeah, I know. For me, I'm an machine. I got to edit that. I want that stuff out of there. So I did see somebody ask that question today in Facebook. Should I edit my podcast? And I just go, book editors, newspaper editors, movie editors.
Yeah. Yeah. All those three, because you're locked up. We'll give you a second to come back here. Maybe you might be right. You might be crazy.
Why would you
this just might be the lunatic. You locked up a little bit. You had gotten the three.
You might be a lunatic.
Yeah. You had gotten the three, the news.
And I back?
You are back a little bit. Yeah.
Newspaper, books, and movies all have editors. Like if I can make myself sound better, why would I not do that? Yeah. I love Todd and Rob. I would love Todd and Time. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I love Todd and Rob, but I almost want to go to them now and go, can I edit your show? Because I'm going to listen anyway. and they've had a few things where they're just like, they're taking tangents, or they're having problems with when they were interviewing the Google guys, and kind of like this show. I'm going to edit out all the weird parts of this show before it goes live. The people who watch the video are like, get a special treat, but the audio is not going to go out with me turning into Bugs Bunny or whatever. So.
Yeah. Well, and I always treat it like this is the live archive. In other words, this is the very raw version of everything. And then, we make minor edits. I don't edit out ums and ahs on the Gallup stuff, and I definitely don't do it on Home Gadget Geeks. It's just there's no value in that on either side. Now, there's some talk. We're doing some talk about an audiobook. That's definitely going to get edited. Like, I'm going to edit that bad boy right down to the millisecond. So, in that kind of scenario, that's what's expected. And so I need to have a better level of service available there than just, just taking out the ums and the ahs. I don't know, chat room. Yes or no? Do you edit every single and ah in your podcast? Is that something you guys find value in? Yeah, I did. Brett, I did. Thanks for catching that, by the way. Appreciate that. It's always interesting too, the level, what people consider swearing. Like that some words are for some people, some words aren't for some, and depending upon what part of the country you're on and your understanding of English as to what this. Well, we now know Dave is definitely gone. So. What's your editing like? What do you do? How much do you obsess about your editing there? Brett, interested while we're talking about that, why do you think he should edit that out? Just what do you think? Like for some they would say, I bet there's a whole group of people here who didn't even hear it in the chat room. They just went right past him. So why should he? If he's, I'm not trying to be antagonistic with you, but I'm just kind of wondering what you think. So Gabrielle says, I do, unless it helps to set the tone for something. Yeah, you could, in your audio edits, you could actually disrupt the tone. Like if you get too aggressive with your editing, this is really applicable. Like I used to do this a lot where I would go in and take out silence. You can, in Audacity, you can go in and say, hey, if the silence is longer than 1 second, I want you to condense it down to a second. And you could take out the silence. Silence has an effect on the tone of the conversation, and that can change the tone. And so, do you really want to edit the tone? Dan says ums, uhs, and ums. Okay, that's good. He says I remove them. This is Dan, if they're distracting to me as I'm editing, but sometimes, hold on, Dan. Sometimes it's moving faster than you can do. Sometimes it's natural pause as something that's thinking hard. I leave those in. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm referring to, is like sometimes that pause can be critical in the conversation. And if you take it out, you kind of disrupt the flow there. Now I said a quiet in that sentence, and that's actually kind of part of the sentence itself. And if you may not choose to edit the that I just said. I was saying something, and then that's actually it's part of the thought. It's not necessarily an you've heard those people say the ums. You've heard those people say ums. Dave does this a lot when he's then you're kind of thinking that way. You can your guest might say and it, you might actually want to leave it in. It may be something that you want to deal with of leaving it in, because it adds a dramatic effect to what they're saying. So Gabrielle also says pauses are a good thing. Craig says I give a talk about disfluencies at Podfest. It seems that there are many different options on what to edit and what to leave in. Yeah, I know, we're having that discussion kind of right now. NPR keeps a lot of pauses. Pauses can be good. They can also be very uncomfortable. If somebody's asking a question and it doesn't deserve a pause, just putting a pause in for effect may not be something people want to keep in. We're back to just me, so we'll keep going. It removes 160. Max says it removed. Let's see. He did. Did I miss a comment? I might have missed a comment earlier, Max, but removed 160 ums from the last show. I had to fix about 3 of those. That must have been an automatic remover. Let me see if I can go back. Let's see. Max. Oh, Descript. Yeah, Descript automatically removes the ums. That's kind of what I thought, but I wanted to make sure that was right. And then, so let's see there, I used an because I needed a second to think about what I was going to say. Descript will automatically remove those, and there may be certain situations. Some people say ums fast, like it'll go, and then like that's hard to edit. That's a hard in the WAV file. It's hard to get that, and if you don't, you got to cut it off, but you also have to crunch the front end of that. Go from I forget what they call that in Audacity, but it goes quiet to loud. It's kind of like a Pac-Man, like you're kind of crunching it. That is a technique, but you have to be really careful with that because they'll come in on a word and the tone is wrong. It sounds wrong. You're like, ooh, there was something before that. And so you've got to work. You can't always edit those ums out because they're not always nice and neat. And there we go. Nice and neat and have the ability to do so in a way that that makes a difference. So let's see. You guys are doing great in the chat room, by the way. Yeah. Eileen says, I think that's what most people like about back to the OBS conversation, that people like the price. It is free. Let's see. What else? Ums and ahs. This is Craig. Ums and ahs signal that we want to keep speaking and that we still have the floor. Yes, that's a good example of somebody, hey, I need to think about this for a second. I'm going to take a break. And in our language, sometimes we're afraid as soon as we take a pause, someone else will jump in on that. They'll have the talker who jumps in. So you can use, I never thought of that, but you can use ums in a defensive role to continue to keep the conversation going right there. I just had to think twice to stop saying by the way, in that. See, I just did it. I use them in transitions. So I'll be having one thought and then it's a natural thing to say as I go into a transition. So I've really got to work on that. But it does, Craig, that does bring up an interesting point in our interviews as we're interviewing people of knowing when to jump in. Like when is it okay to ask the next question? When is it okay to interrupt? Because I think there's certain circumstances you might have a guest that is going too long and you kind of know, okay, we got the point. I'm going to edit them. I'm going to stop this edit like 2 minutes ago. And I really want to move on to the next subject. So I might interrupt. And I don't know how you guys feel about that. I try not to interrupt very often, but there are times you need to. Dave and I step on each other from time to time in this show, and we'll interrupt each other just kind of based on, it's easier for me to interrupt him now because he doesn't have control in the sense that, he's dropping out and it's okay. Right. It's just part of the process. But when do you interrupt? We'll throw this in the chat room. Like, is it okay, chat room? Is it okay to interrupt? Is it okay? When is it okay to interrupt? Brandon in the chat room says, I interviewed Christopher Judge. Oh, Brandon, you did? I love Christopher Judge. Christopher Judge from Stargate. I cut out more of his ums than there were the other words. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to use the interview, but it was one of my favorite interviews ever. So we're big Stargate fans here. Christopher Judge we're big fans of him. So I have to go back. Shoot me that link. I'd love to hear that podcast where you did that. But do you guys, when is it okay to interrupt? Brandon, you had also made a comment while I'm waiting for those comments to come in. You made a comment that you enjoy. You said, I really enjoy watching Dave drop and seeing how Jim is just rolling with the punches, teaching us how to do a live show. Yeah, this doesn't happen automatically. There's a little bit, and I'm not saying it's the most comfortable thing in the world to do either. There's actually a whole bunch of things going on around me as well. My wife just came home with groceries and she's putting them away. And so there's all kinds of movement going on around me. She brought me, I don't know if you guys like this, but this is my favorite snack in the whole world, Munch. And it's just so delicious. So she brought me some of those. So tons of distractions, not only with what's going on with Dave, but trying to monitor the chat room as well as keeping track of you guys in the chat room. It's a little bit of work. It's just one of those things. I've been doing this. I think this is where practice helps. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it either. So do you guys interrupt? Craig says you can interrupt with a compliment. You make an interesting point there, but can I just ask, Craig, that's a great way. Like, hey, wait a minute. This is another one. Hey, wait a minute. You said something really interesting there. And before we forget it, can we, most guests won't realize you're interrupting them at that point. They'll be like, oh, cool. Yeah, I did say something interesting. And so that they won't take offense. Have you ever had chat room? Have you ever interrupted someone and they get mad at you for that? Like they feel offended or they feel frustrated that they've been interrupted. Good question there. Well, thanks. Carrie says I'm doing a good job. So thanks. I'm only doing a good job because you guys are putting things in the chat room, by the way. So continue to do that. I'm kind of feeding off of, I should probably move the chat room a little bit closer. So it looks like maybe I'm looking a little more at the camera on that one. I leave it way off to the right because usually it's not an issue on this one, but you never know. So have you ever, chat room, have you guys ever interrupted? I'm trying to think, have I interrupted a guest? And by the time Dave comes back, we'll be done with the show. Have you guys ever interrupted a guest and had them get mad? What would I do? Like if Dave never comes back, I guess if I just leave, I don't know how that would work. We started a little late, so we'll go a little late. I'll wait for Dave to come back. Carrie says, not me, but I tend to be a very patient listener, but I do get frustrated when people interrupt me without acknowledging why. Yeah. Well, Carrie, I think your point on that. Let's see if Dave's in Slack. No. So I think your point on that is well taken. The interruption just for interruption's sake. In other words, when someone just wants to, you've had that happen, right? To you, and you're talking to somebody, and they're like, they're just waiting for your lips to stop moving, and you can kind of see them, right? You've seen that. You've had that. And that's super frustrating. And I'm not going to say I haven't done that myself to people. Like I might be bad at that. I get excited in a conversation and I'm like, yeah, but me. Yeah, you and me, Brian Regan. If you haven't seen this Brian Regan skit. So Brian Regan, super funny, really clean comedy, by the way. Brian Regan, he's got this, I think he's talking about, I think it's called Moonwalker. I think that's the name of the skit, Moonwalker. Talks about how he always wishes he had been one of the 7 astronauts that had walked on the moon. So at parties when people are trying, because those conversations where everybody's trying to one up each other, like, well, I had an impacted tooth. This is his skit, right? Well, I had 2, I had 4, I had 8, and one was crawling out my nose, kind of thing. And so we get in. I don't find that happening on podcasts. I don't find interviews, even in group or in roundtable discussions. I don't find that that one-upmanship is as big of a deal as when you're at a party or with friends or you're just with a group of people. And you've seen that, right? They just constantly, well, you think that's bad. You just told the story about, somebody having cancer and they're like, well, you think that's bad. And you're like, no, it is bad. Don't try to one up it. It's bad. Craig says my pet peeve is when interviewers keep affirming with and yes and other noises. Ooh, that add nothing to the conversation. I am super guilty of this. In fact, I've had to work really, really hard in my interviews for Gallup of not doing that. So in other words, when you're in person and you're doing that and you say it, nobody cares. But on the audio, you don't want the other person, I think, I'm with you, Craig. You don't want the other person to go, yeah, oh, yeah. Now, it's okay in some spots, but I was bad. I was doing this all the time. And I had a listener just called me out. They were like, "Hey, could you quit?" And actually, it was my audio editor. He was like, "Hey, can you quit saying yes in the middle of the interviews? Like that's not good." You know where it's not good is in transcripts. That it's particularly bad in transcripts. And so the guy who edits my transcripts now leaves it out, and I'm doing less of it. But Craig, that's a super good point that you make there, is that for audio and video may not be great if we're constantly affirming them. So I don't know. Take that again. I'll admit I was bad at that. I'm getting better. I'm not perfect, but I do try to. What's made me better is I do these interviews or these testimonies where you don't want to hear the other person, and so I actually have to mute myself so that they can't hear me agreeing with it. So super good point. Max says, I don't interrupt, but when they stop talking, I may come back and say, let's circle back to that. Well, and so the opposite side of interrupting, of course, is having this long gap, right, at the end of a question. The human tendency is to fill that space, either by the guest or by you, or to come in too quick. I've actually, I've told guests in the past, if there's an audio, if you're done with the sentence and I don't come back in right away, don't feel like that's a clue to keep talking. Like I don't want you to reiterate the point again, because what we'll do, or what guests will do, is they'll get uncomfortable and then they'll just keep talking. They'll say, yeah. And it's just like when you're doing an interview and you say, is there anything else? Like you get to the end of their question and like, anything else you want to say? And they'll go, no. And then they'll say something. Have you noticed that? It happens all the time. It's so funny when that happens. It's like no, I don't, I think we covered everything, but, and then they'll say one more thing. I cut that part out if I can, take that piece away, because they did have something more to say. But it's a natural tendency, I think, for people to want to say, no, I think we covered everything. Oh, but in them saying we covered everything, they think of one more thing. So it is a thing. Carrie says, my husband's a chronic interrupter. And when we talked about it, he says he just does so. He gets so excited to add to the point and fears forgetting the point. If he doesn't blurt it out, it won't get heard right then. My wife does the same thing, by the way. And you know what? I probably do too. And maybe that's kind of a common human problem. There are people who are better at it than others for sure. But I think it's a kind of I got to say this right now. I've gotten to the point now where I start writing things down to try to stop that. Like if I'm in a conversation, I'll just say, while they're talking, I'll be like, and I'll write it down. Now, what's interesting is if you start doing that in person, people will stop talking. What are you writing down? But it gives me the ability to not be I've got to say it right now. Kenny says, in your opinion, if I'm getting about 100 downloads per day, where do you think I can rate in the overall scheme of things? Is all podcasters? I hope that makes sense. Yeah, 100 a day, all podcasters. So that's probably pretty good, just to be honest. I don't have the current numbers. I don't want to look. Kenny, I don't think you should look at it that way. I think you should look. We say this a lot here on the show. It's not about downloads. It's about engagement. What are you getting for those 100 downloads a day? So what's your call to action in your podcast? And it can be anything. At work, certainly we have product and I'm trying to get customers moved in certain directions. For Home Gadget Geeks, it's to get them into our social circles, right? We want to create community. My Home Gadget Geeks podcast is only made to create community. That's the only reason I have it. I don't sell anything. Well, I have a Patreon account, some of those other kind of things, but most of the reason is to create community. So, what's your CTA, Kenny? What are you hoping to get out of it? And then I would measure that. And it could be your goal is to go 200 a day. That's okay. Do things to start, set your goals appropriately. Doesn't really matter what you're doing against the industry, to be honest. If your niche is super tight, I have a really narrow focus at Gallup, right? Not just strengths, but Clifton strengths, and not just Clifton strengths, but Clifton strengths with our certified coaches. That's going to limit the number. There's only so many people on the planet, and it's less than 50,000 probably. I'm never going to see the hundreds of thousands of downloads. It's just not going to happen because there's just not enough people on the planet to listen to that. that are interested in that. So my audience niche is tight. So Kenny, what's your niche? How big is it? What is your potential? I would measure it against that. And then I'd measure it against yourself. Are you gaining listeners month over month, week over week, whatever, whatever you want to do. Dan says, I cut all those affirmations out when the guest is talking. My track gets cut completely. Yeah. One of the advantages, Dan, and a good point, and I don't do this, but one of the advantages to multi-track recording, right, is you could still do the affirmations, which I think is actually important in person. When you're making those affirmations, that fuels the person talking, that gives them fuel. They're like, oh, okay, what I'm saying. Yeah, what I'm saying. You can do that with your eyes, by the way, or you can do that with your body language. You can do things, honestly, don't make it up, but you can do things that way and so that they don't show up. But one of the advantages to definitely doing multi-track recording is that allows you to do that. Brandon says, I interrupt in post. I edit for content a lot. My job is to make sure the guests sound as smart as possible. And that is good. That's very, very true. I've had some really smart guests who a lot. And you're right, when you can take some of those out or some of those things that they said that didn't really, everything we said is not necessarily worth recording. I wonder how much of this that I've just said is even worth recording. And I kind of wonder if Dave's ever going to come back. Will he? So who knows? Randy says, I've started talking and I can't shut up. Are you saying that about me, Randy? I'm just kidding. So Carrie says, so I've tried to change my attitude to I appreciate the enthusiasm rather than how rude for the interruption. It's a great way to approach things. I'd rather have someone excited to talk to me than not. And I think frame of mind or frame of reference or the position you put yourself in is it's really good. I've got to work on that myself with family when they do that kind of stuff and just sit back and let it ride because it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter. Usually it's just me being frustrated. If I just let it go, I know that's the hard part. I think sometimes if we think we don't address it, it's not going to get taken care of. Oftentimes that doesn't really matter. Carrie says, are a tough habit to break. And they are indeed. You've seen, like, I'm thinking about it now and it is, you have to be intentional about it. If you're going to do it live to the hard drive, if you are going to, like I wanted to say, right there. If you are going to do, if you know you're going to edit, ums don't matter because you can take them out. Just be smart about umming. Make sure you and then give a good break. By the way, in the WAV file, in Audacity, and the other ones, you can often see those ums that are in there. Descript takes them out. It can. So if you give it some good breaks around it, oftentimes it doesn't matter. If you're gonna edit and take them out, don't worry about it. Be natural in your speaking. Oh, yeah. Randy says, Jim, you're going to hear a lot of pen play. I have been doing that, haven't I? I've been clicking my pen. Another bad habit that comes into that. And actually a bad habit of mine that I have is having a pen in my hands and clicking it. So, no, Randy, it's actually, it's perfectly fine. It's a great example of the things sometimes we don't realize we're doing. I'm here doing this alone. And it's a little nerve wracking. Like I'm, even though Dave can edit out all the spots where I don't know what I'm going to say, even though he could do that. I don't even know if he's going to edit this. So I don't know if I may never see the light of day, but you get those things where again, and this is a super loud clicker and I was clicking it pretty good. And that probably ruined the audio. There may have been some, maybe not, but there could have been some things in there that were worthy, but because it's got click, click, click in the background. Yeah. So it's important. It's important. You don't hear it yourself. Like I don't hear it. It's not funny that you have this thing and you're clicking it and everybody else hears it but you don't. And it's a good reminder. It is a super good reminder. Carrie says, that's funny. I didn't notice it at all till he pointed it out. And that's another, sometimes those things never get noticed. Well, yeah. So Carrie says, but maybe because I'm watching it live, the audio only, it might be more noticeable. And there's actually some truth in that, right? So when you're engaging with your eyes, it's taking up brain power that your ear senses may not notice, and so you may not in a video form. Some of you didn't. I don't know who noticed. Throw it in the chat room. Who noticed and who didn't that I was clicking that pen? You know what I need? Need a little more coffee. We don't have the coffee pour sound here. Nah, it doesn't make that sound. The one Dave uses does it into a paper cup. Well, okay. Any other? Well, you got me, chat room. Any other questions as we come to the end of this? We're coming up on 10:45. I think Dave gave up. I literally think he is beating that modem right now. And maybe he said, okay, I'm going to disconnect it and I'm going to Best Buy, and Jim will finish up the show. So that's, and he's like, I'm just going to take care of it. So maybe he is. Brandon said he noticed after reading the comment. Yeah, it is. And it's so, Randy, it's those kinds of things, Gerard. I'm glad you pointed it out, by the way. It's a great example. It's perfect. But personally, it drives me nuts. Like, oh, why do I do those things, right? Maybe you have anybody, you can throw this in the chat room. Anybody have that thing I asked earlier, like what's the one technical nemesis? Is that the right word? What's your own personal nemesis? What's something that you do? Like, I'm terrible with names. That's just been lately. It's just been a real problem for me. What's your nemesis out there? Yeah, Craig said, did Dave say there's a meetup for Patreons? Yeah, today at 1, I think is what he said, 1 Eastern, maybe. So he is trying to get his modem up and working so that he can join you guys on that Patreon. That was super important to him that he was able to join you guys today. Michael, thanks for the encouragement in the chat room. It's just fun. It's fun to hang out with you guys. This is not my gift, by the way. I am not the most comfortable doing a solo. I would not want to do this on a regular basis. I'd quit podcasting probably if this is what I was going to do. Just not my favorite thing to do. I'll do it in a pinch, but not my favorite thing to do. Kenny's back. Kenny says, my podcast is a marketing arm on my membership website. And he says he uses his podcast as a marketing arm on my membership site, and it does really well. Awesome. So if you understand your podcast is the top of the funnel, that leads them into, and the bottom of the funnel is the membership site, and you're having success converting them from the top to the bottom, then you're having success. Like that's all that means. You comparing yourself to everybody else in the space is irrelevant. I mean, Kenny, use it as fuel though. Like, you still want, your goal is to get as many people as you can, right? I mean, if that's what you're trying to do. Now, in some cases, it's not. Maybe you're trying to gather just a niche, super engaged. You don't want the thousands or the tens of thousands. You want hundreds. Okay, well, whatever your stated goal is, then that's what it is. And our goal may not always be thousands or tens of thousands of listeners. Sometimes the goal might be an engaged audience, right? Let's see what else is out there. Daniel, my nemesis is spiraling out of my groove. Like, I mess up, then I mess up again. And at some point I feel like the whole thing should be scrapped. Yeah, no, I understand that one. I understand. Daniel, I've done some interviews where I've messed up somebody's name in the first part of the interview. And what I should just do is stop and start over. Like, it's the very beginning of the podcast. Like, I can do that. I'm like, okay, I messed that up. Let's just do this again. But then I keep going because they're live. I keep going. And then it bothers me the whole interview. And I think I'm not as good because I just didn't. I need to learn how to pronounce their name before they come on the podcast. Like, not, hey, pronounce that for me, 5 minutes before we go live. Not a great idea. But maybe just stopping at that point. Okay, let's just reset. I did not like that. Or just re-recording that segment, whatever, right? You can do that even live. I think, in fact, live listeners, I think, sometimes like to see those mess ups, right? Those bloopers. That's kind of why they join live. Carrie says, I've been shooting for 19 years and I still, to this day, I shoot like 3 degrees crooked. I have to straighten my horizons every dang time, even when I'm thinking about it. Yeah. It's one of those like, oh, why am I? We all have these little things that, as much as we try, tough to overcome. Then he says what I said, but then I sometimes start all over and I get in a better groove. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's what I was saying as well. I think it's good to just stop and start over again and just like, hey, we're going to start this thing over. I know we're doing this live, but we're going to start this thing over. Is that okay? So no, that made sense, Carrie. She said shooting as in photos. I just realized, well, I mean, okay. Let's not go down that path. Craig says, hey, Daniel, I learned from you how to pause and rephrase when I messed up. It makes editing so much easier. So thanks for that. If you're audio only, that's super easy. Like you can really easily just stop. If you're video, that gets more complicated. You really got to think about that a little more and say, okay, we need to get big blocks of things and make sure, depending on how you're going to edit that video, we have to have big blocks so that we can either bridge the gap with B-roll or bridge the gap with a transition, some of those lines. Editing the middle of a sentence in video is, I'm not going to say impossible, but not as fun. It's harder. So that's my problem with live is I like to get going and then I feel I make a mistake and I should just start over. Like, again, like usually it's in the first minute or two of the show. I should just start over. I did one 2 weeks ago. That was that way. And I just really messed up in the beginning and I should have stopped. I still have nightmares about that, by the way. I still think about that moment. I'm like, oh, why didn't I just start over? I'm pretty hard on myself on some of those kinds of things. I could get the name right today. I could get it. I could easily do it today because I've thought about it so much. So that does teach me, like, I need to get names earlier because I struggle with it. I need to get names earlier and actually practice them before I go. Have that kind of thing nailed down. It has to be natural. And it's important. People's names are important. When you have somebody on the show and you mispronounce their name. Brandon says YouTube is all about jump cuts now. Yeah, you're right, Brandon. I watch a lot of videos. I would not do a jump cut interview though. Like I wouldn't do jump cuts wouldn't work for the stuff that I do, I think. Oh, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe the kids would, I don't know. There are some styles. I watch this guy, Cole the Corn Star. He's a farmer out in Iowa, not too far from me. In his whole YouTube, 12 minutes of jump cuts. And it's pretty good. I mean, I kind of like it. He cuts out a lot of stuff. He gets right to the point and films this whole day and then jump cuts it into 12 minutes. Pretty great. I'm not sure I'd want that. And I would want an interview. Craig says ugly jump cuts are pretty common on YouTube these days. I think it's become more mainstream. Yeah. I don't disagree. I'm not super comfortable with it. Yeah, I'm not super comfortable with an interview jump cut, or at least my stuff being jump cut. Like that would make this, maybe, I don't know. It's a good conversation. I don't know, chat room. What do you guys think? What do you think about jump cuts? Carrie says, yeah, not for an interview, but if you're doing a talking head or a demo or a gear review, that could work. Yeah, maybe jump cut interviews. Kyle says maybe jump cut interviews with voiceover on B-roll. Well, B-roll, the whole B-roll concept is created so you can fix mistakes, like you can fix audio mistakes. That's I'm overshooting that a little bit, but you get the point. Like B-roll can be your friend, and when you have bad audio and you can't sync it to video anymore because it looks bad, B-roll can save you. So that's kind of a way to do it. Yeah, Brandon, Cole, C-O-L-E, Cole the Corn Star. And super good guy, really clean podcast. You'd think from the name that it may not be, but super clean podcast. He's just a farmer showing what he's doing in Iowa. And I don't know why, but I like watching him. He's kind of a real guy. His family's kind of gotten into the space. This is one where I think he started, and then some of his family members were like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll start my own YouTube channel. And some of them have. I think his sister has, and then his girlfriend started one, and they're having, he's got 50,000 subs, maybe 20,000 subs, something like that. He's doing pretty well with it. It's changing his farming. Like he's getting all kinds of attention where he has companies coming up and working with him around farming stuff that I don't think he would have gotten. He may not have gotten otherwise. Randy says his whole podcast is an audio B-roll. That's pretty funny. Gary says, that's like a photographer who mostly shoots in color, and they have one random heavily edited black and white. It means that it was beyond help, but it's still a cool image. Solution, black and white. Yeah. It's sometimes those you got to go to those measures if you got a good interview, but the video was video and you want to show the video, but the guest was not good on video. There may be some things you can do to chop that up that aren't as drastic as jump cutting. Daniel says audio B-roll could be a good, cool name for a podcast. Could indeed. I thought of a cool podcast name the other day. What was it? Shoot, I told my daughter about it. She's coming back on my show, by the way. It's pretty great. End of the month, end of July. She's my daughter. She's 21. She goes to Northwest Missouri State. She is she's pretty good little podcaster. And I had my audience ask for her back. That's a pretty great thing. We had her on Christmas time. So last year, like a world away when remember the world last year, 2019, remember what it was like then? So she came on, and I think she'd been on the summer before. So she'd been on twice. And at beginning of the show, I was talking about getting some audience feedback. And one of the feedback was like, get your daughter back on the podcast. She's great. So she'll be coming back July 30th, I think is what I have her set up for. And we're going to get caught up with her, talk a little bit about her as she's transitioning in the fall. She may have to transition back into school completely online. She's a huge Pokemon Go player and has recently got into D&D. And so we'll have some fun. We'll have some fun with that. So, well, I think, guys, unless there is Craig says B-roll is London slang for toilet paper. The things you find out. The things you find out on Ask the Podcast Coach. We're at 10:55, which for me means we're coming to the end here, and Dave is probably getting his things fixed. I'm just going to drop this, which I'm assuming when I do, I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know. Chat room, what do you guys know what's going to happen in StreamYard? When I drop this, will it end for you, or will it just be a blank video? I'm assuming it'll stop. I don't have any controls. This is where it'd be nice if the controls would default over to me. So that's okay. Daniel, I just saw your note. I had covered up the private chat with the chat room by mistake, and I just saw the note. I appreciate you being willing to jump in on this one. I don't have any controls, so I couldn't have brought you in anyway. So I appreciate you doing that. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Appreciate you guys. Chat room's great. I appreciate you guys hanging with us today, and I appreciate you guys every week. I don't get a chance to say this very often to you guys because Dave's my cog. No, I'm just kidding. He's not, but he kind of is. No, he's not. So I appreciate you guys and how you support Dave. I really do. Many of you support him on Patreon, and many of you support him in many ways. And he's just my favorite guy on the planet. And I appreciate that. So thanks for coming out on Saturdays. You give us your Saturday mornings. You don't have to. And it's important to me that we create a great community. All I care about is community. And so I really want to thank you for coming out on Saturday mornings and doing this each and every Saturday. I don't know why you do, but you do. And for the 15 of you that stayed around to hear me blab on for 45 minutes, thanks for hanging around. I appreciate you guys as well. So have a great Saturday. We'll see you back here next week. We'll get Dave's internet fixed, and we'll see you. Have a great week.